शुक्लां वरदनं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये दक्षिणामूर्तिसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्परां गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुर्साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। अखण्डमण्डलाकारं व्याप्तं येन चराचरं तत्पदं दर्शितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। So we just prayed to Lord Ganpati, okay, to give us an obstacle-free session. The first thing always we do is we pray to Ganpati, so that all obstacles are removed. Okay. So in our culture, what we do is the first god that we pray is Ganpati, and the last god that we pray is Hanuman. So what we are going to do as a part of the session is that our first prayer is going to be for Ganpati. That was Suklam Varadanam Vishnu, Shashivarnam Chaturbhujam, Prasannavadanam Dhyayet, Sarvavignam Upashantaye. And we are going to end with Hanuman Chalisa. I have already sent you the lyrics. Don't get pressurized. You can just read through the lyrics. Over a period of time, you will kind of gather the words. Yeah? So the idea is that we begin with Ramayana. But can I begin with Ramayana directly? So the answer is no, we cannot. Because I need to give and set up a certain background. Right? I need to set up a background to our culture, to our religion, to its depth and to its expanse, in a manner that then you will be able to understand the flow of the story. Then you'll be able to fit the story into that particular superstructure, right? And that is the reason I'm going to begin today's session with a certain level of background. At the fag end of the session today, we'll probably have about 45 minutes to 1 hour kind of a session. I will try and begin the Ramayana anyway, so that it kind of holds your interest. But it is important for you all to understand the background, and hence I'm going to start with the background as of now. So if you remember in the first introductory talk that we had spoken that although we call ourselves Hindu, that is not the name that has been given to a religion, right? So what was the name that was given to a religion? It was called as Sanatana Dharma. Okay? Sanatana means that which goes on, that which has no beginning, that which has no end. It goes on and on and on, right? That is what is called Sanatana. And Dharma means a set of rules. These rules were established by Vishnu. Now these set of rules are rules for how do we live our lives, rules for how do we pray to God, okay? Rules with regards to the way marriages are conducted, rules with regards to how professions are to be conducted. Okay, so there are detailed rules for a lot of things that our culture talks of. So these rules are embedded into this dharma, and this dharma, since it doesn't have a beginning, it doesn't have a middle, and it doesn't have an end. It has always existed in time immemorial. This dharma is called as Sanatana Dharma. Okay. Over a period of time when Britishers occupied us, because we belong to a civilization which is popularly known as the Indus Valley Civilization. The word Indus got modified to Hindu, and people who live on this side of the Indus Valley Civilization began to be called as Hindu. Now that is more of a contorting nature. So the Britishers couldn't understand what Sanatana Dharma is. They came with a very little knowledge of the expanse and the ancientness of our culture. So they just called us Hindus. Technically, we are not Hindus at all. We are Sanatana Dharmis. Okay, that is first. But we will keep interchangingly keep using the word Hindu because it's kind of got into our lingo. It's kind of got into our mindset. We might use the word Hindu on and off, but you have to remember that the word coined Hindu is wrong. The word has to be Sanatana Dharma. A few things which I would want to establish in terms of principles, okay, is that there is an X amount of faith that we require. When we look at our religion, we have to look at from a point of view of a certain amount of faith, okay. So it's like this, it's a kind of faith that we have on our parents. right? When our parents pet us, when our parents scold us, we still don't get angry on them, right? We might get angry momentarily, but we will still trust them, right? We still trust the fact that they have told the right thing to us, and in the long run, this thing is going to hold us in good stead. So generally, we have a very high amount of faith, a trust in our parents. So that is the kind of trust that it is required when we are talking about our religion. The reason why I am saying that is because we've been brought up in Western education, right? Western education, what happens is we are constantly taught to check for evidences and proofs, right? Now that is something that has been fed to us by science, by the Western way of educating us. But in our religion, we go beyond evidences. And there are things which are beyond evidences, which are difficult to prove within the four corners of evidences, but they still exist. So there's a branch of physics which is called as metaphysics. Okay, so science has got different branches, right? You have biology, you have chemistry, and you have physics broadly. Yeah. So physics is considered to be one of the science bodies which are advanced a lot. And they have reached a level of metaphysics. So they have actually come to stay and to believe that there are things in nature that exist, but we cannot prove them. Okay, so things like a black hole, okay, or things like why there is gravity. Okay, so we know when something we throw up falls down, right? But why is it so? Why doesn't gravity work opposite? Yeah. So a lot of things which physics has come to believe that yes, we can prove a certain thing, but beyond that, metaphysics takes over and they say, okay, they do exist, but we are not able to reason out as of today. So our inability to reason something doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Okay, so we need to come from that perspective when we are specifically talking about our culture, our religion, right? Our dharma, right? So dharma is the right word. Ours is actually not a religion, it's a dharma. It's a set of rules which encompasses a lot of things in our lives. So who are these people who actually got this particular set of rules for us? Okay, so as you all are aware, so there are three primary gods, right? We know Vishnu, Brahma, and Ishwar. Ishwar is Shiva, right? Now each have a particular job to do. Brahma is in charge of creation, right? He is the person who creates the nature. Vishnu is in charge of maintaining the nature, right? And Shiva is in charge of destroying it. Why do you need somebody to destroy? Because unless and until you destroy the old, the new cannot replace it, right? It's like taking birth, living a life, and dying. We need to die. Unless we die, there's no new person who's going to come in place of us. So destruction is equally a part of the nature as is creation and maintaining. So you have Brahma in charge of creation, Vishnu is in charge of the operations of the day-to-day activities, and Shiva in charge of the destruction. Now these are positions which are given to them. Okay, God in its supreme being is a formless being. Okay, formless being is beyond all characteristics. But we humans, we would like, because we have form and shape, we would also like to give God form and shape so that we are able to address them, so that we are able to relate to them. So we give them 2 eyes, nose, ears, mouth, face, hands, and because they are gods, they have 4 hands. Okay, and Shiva has 3 eyes, right? So that they look that much more powerful, and then we attribute certain additional features to them. Right? That's the reason we say God are powerful. Okay, they can do things. Now Vedas, okay, which is the primary source for our dharma, was created by Vishnu. Okay, now these set of rules are in a form of a sound wave. Okay, they are not in a written form, they are in a form of a sound wave. Now these sound waves are there existing in the nature always. They are always existing, they are existing even today. Okay, they are getting narrated and they are in the form of a sound wave vibration on a continuing basis across the nature. The word for nature in our dharma is Prakriti. Okay, Prakriti is the name for the word nature. So in the Prakriti, Vedas continues to exist in the form of a sound wave. So who read these sounds? Can we hear? So we are not able to hear. It's like an FM radio, right? Now radio waves are continuously in the air, but can we hear them? We can't. We need a radio which has the ability to decode the transmitted waves, FM radios, FM the waves, and then transfer it to sound, right? Similarly, our scientists are our rishis. Rishis are sages, okay? Sages are called rishis. So rishis had that ability to tap into those sound waves and then convert them into mantras. Okay, that is what Vedas then, that is how we got Vedas in the form of mantras. They had the power to convert the subtle silent sound which sustains the nature into a verbal sound and give it to us as a gift. Okay. Now these Vedas are considered as old as the nature, as old as the Prakriti. So they do not have a beginning, that is, they do not have an Adi, and there is no Anta, which means that there is no end either. So it is Anadi, Ananta. It is always existing. Okay. But the Vedas are extremely abstract. Now if I were to really narrate Vedas, we will not understand anything. Right? We are all common human beings. We don't understand Vedas at all. Right? So we needed somebody to explain that to us. Okay. So then what happened is, then you had Vedangas, then you had Vedantas, then you had Upanishads which explained the Vedas in a manner that humans can understand. We were unable to understand even Upanishads. So God said, okay, let us try and make it further more simple for us. So those concepts, those philosophies, those ideas which were discussed in Vedas and Upanishads had to be further broken down and simplified such that common man can understand, and thus came the Puranas. Okay, Puranas, when I say Puranas, means all the old knowledge that is existing in the form of stories. If you remember, we had told there are these fables, right? Like you have Aesop fable, you have the fairy tales in the western part of the world. You have something called as the Puranas, which explain all the secrets of life, the messages that Dharma has to give. Okay, the message that Vedas gave, the messages that Upanishads gave, all of this got explained in terms of stories. So two people discussing and narrating a story, and a moral gets established from that story, that becomes a Purana. So you had multiple Puranas being written. The most famous are the 18 Mahapuran. Okay, 18 Mahapuran, all of them were written by Vedavyasa. Okay, Vedavyasa also did one more great service to mankind. What he did, he actually classified the Vedas. Okay, Vedas were a single source of mantras with no classification. It's a continuous form of sound energy which was transferred into a verbal sound as mantras. But they had categorization. So some spoke of music, some spoke of medicine, some spoke of normal life, married life, some spoke of how to do puja. Okay, some spoke of how to construct a temple, some spoke of how to do a yagna. So a lot of subjects were covered. Some spoke of astrology, some spoke of surgery, mathematics, trigonometry, geometry. So you think of it, and each of the subjects were covered by the Vedas. So they had to somebody had to sit and classify these Vedas, which is what Vedavyasa did. Vedavyasa is the rishi who did this classification. Vyasa means to classify. Vedavyasa, his actual name is Krishna Dvaipayana. Okay, he was born to Parashar and Satyavati. His job was to classify Vedas into 4 different quarters, right? Sama, Yajur, Atharvana, and Rig. So these are the 4 Vedas he classified. Because he sat and classified it, his name became Vedavyasa. The person who classified Vedas is Vedavyasa. So he is a person who classified the Vedas. He is a person who also, to explain the Vedas, gave 18 Mahapuranas in the form of stories, so that we understand those stories properly and the morals get embedded to us. Just explaining the concept, I'm sure Sheetal will also agree, when you just explain a concept, it's very difficult for children to understand. When you put it into a story, that story remains in your mind and the moral coming out of the story gets embedded. That is the reason we have the Puranas. we humans were still dumb. We didn't even understand those Puranas, and we finding it difficult because there were short stories, and it was very confusing in terms of who the king was, who the wife was, how many children he had, and short stories with short messages. So it became very difficult for people to understand those stories. So then they decided we should have something called as an Itihasa Purana, where God himself decided that I will come down in a form of an avatar, play out a particular role, and make it a history. So Itihasa means, Itihasa in literal terms is history. What it basically means, Itihasa means that is how it was. Okay, Itihasa, that is how it was. Which means it is a history Purana which got established. And there are two history Puranas, that is a Itihasa Purana. One is Ramayana and the other is Mahabharata. Right? Ramayana is about Rama. Mahabharata is about lot of things and also about Krishna. Okay? So that is why Ramayana is considered to be a more Shrestha Purana, which means a better Purana. Why? Because it spoke only of Rama. It begins with Rama, it talks of Rama, continuously talks of Rama and ends with Rama. So it spoke of nothing else. Well, Mahabharata, it begins with somewhere else. Krishna comes probably in what, about 8,000th or 9,000th verse. And then he keeps going off and on, and there are a lot of other things that you talk. You talk of Bhishma, you talk of Pandavas, you talk of Kauravas, you talk of a war, you talk of gambling, you talk of going to forest, and you also talk about Krishna. So in that sense, Mahabharata, of course, is a great epic, but Ramayana is considered to be a more focused epic. Now, it is also important, another background that I would want to establish over here before we get on to the story per se. Our religion has got stories with a lot of versions. Okay, so I might be referring to a particular version, and there might be 100 different versions to that particular story. Okay. And this will often happen. Like for example, Ramayana itself was written by some 250 different saints. So there are 250 different Ramayanas that we have. Okay. Although the first Ramayana was written by Valmiki, sage Valmiki, but there are a lot of saints who have written Ramayana as per them, as per their understanding, as per what they saw. It is important for us to understand that each of the version is correct. Okay, there are no rights and wrongs in this version for a simple reason. These versions were written by saints themselves because God presented to them the story in that manner. So each of the saints saw that story in that manner. Sant Eknath has written Ramayana in Marathi. He actually saw Ramayana happening in his presence and he wrote it. Okay, Kambar is a person who wrote Ramayana in Tamil. He actually saw Ramayana play in front of his eyesight and he wrote that. So for them, it is what they have written is basically what God showed to them. So each of the version is actually correct, but there would be certain variations. There would be certain additional things because each of the saint had different poetic skills. They brought out certain different aspects of different characters and different stories. They added certain upakatha. Upakatha means side stories to the entire main story to make it that much more interesting. The most important thing across versions is that even if we have versions, the most important thing is that the message from that will always remain the same, right? The message that comes from each of the version is going to remain same. So although we might have versions, I might cover a few versions. So there's a good chance when I narrate a particular story, you might have somebody a few years later down the line telling, oh, this was not the way it was, this is the way it was. There's a different story to it. So we have to be open to it. We have to accept the story saying that yes, that is also a version and a possible version. At the end of the day, it is a message that is important, right? Why Vishnu came in the form of Rama, why Vishnu came in the form of Krishna is to give us message, right? And that is very important for us to understand. A few other aspects about the religion which generally turn out to be a little controversial and hence it is important for me to cover. There is something called as a Kala Desha Niyam, which means a rule for time and space. Okay, it's a time and space rule. Now this rule is a little adaptable rule. Okay, so a rule that probably might apply to a time and to a space, to a geographical space, which is in past, might necessarily not apply today. Okay, so a classic example that we generally give is, for example, in some countries betting and gambling is allowed, while in India it is not allowed, right? So the space changes, rules change, right? Then again, for example, say acts like the Criminal Procedure Code. Over a period of time, there are changes that have happened in these acts. These rules have changed. What was earlier considered as maybe there were 5 definitions to a homicide. Today we probably have 12 definitions to homicide. Okay, why? Because over a period of time there are new things that come up and the rules change, right? Similarly, in our religion also, there are certain rules that have been made applicable in the past, might not apply today, or what is applicable today might have not have been applied in the past. So a good example that I generally give is, those days the kings used to have multiple wives, right? So one Raja and he has 4 Rani or maybe 7 queens or maybe 10 queens or whatever. Okay, it sounds odd, right? Because in today's world we are allowed only to marry once, right? So it sounds odd, but that particular rule applied to a particular time and space when it was valid. Okay, so we need to understand and appreciate that it applied to a time and space when it was valid and it was not invalid. Well, today it might become invalid. So we are not supposed to hold our parents to ransom that I want to marry 3 times. Right? We are not supposed to say that because in today's world it's not allowed. Right? So what is not allowed today necessarily doesn't mean that it never was allowed. Okay? Or concepts, controversial concepts like child marriage, right? I'm not getting into the details, but I'm saying there are certain things that were acceptable norms in those days. It had its benefits, it had its disadvantages, but they were acceptable norms in those days. Today they are not acceptable. Okay? So that is what I meant by Kala Desh Niyam, time and space rules. So when we look at our stories, we might come across situations where a king had 3 wives or somebody getting married at the age of 12. Okay, so we are not supposed to, so let's not question that because it is something that has fallen in place at that particular point of time and was valid and was okay at that point of time. What is more important for us and our focus continuously will remain so is to understand the message from the entire story. The next concept that I want to introduce is a little complex and I would want complete attention over here. Every story has a particular time in which it happened, right? Specifically Ramayana and Mahabharata are Itihasa Purana, which means they are historical epics. So they actually occurred at some point of time, you know. There was a king called Rama, there was a king called Krishna, there was a story that Ramayana happened, there were a set of characters through which the Mahabharata happened. We need to understand when it happened, right? We need to have some sense. So when we look at history, the first thing that whenever history is taught to us, we generally are taught, when did battle of this so and so happen or when this king was born. So we give them an year. Why is it important? Because for us to understand the time and the era when that particular story happened. So I will try and introduce timelines that are used in our culture, and I'm going to keep it very simple. I have covered this in my other sessions, and I've covered it in fairly detail. So I will not make it complex. I'll keep it simple, but even its simplest form, it's going to be complex. So I want you all to be attentive on this. Our religion had the ability to understand time at a very large scale. Okay, so we were able to calculate time for 10 to the power of -7, which is 1/3 of a microsecond. Okay, it is not even a microsecond, it is 1/3 of a microsecond to, that's the smallest possible time, which is called as Truti, to 10 to the power of 12, which is an age of Brahma, okay, which is 100 years of Brahma. So the span is huge, okay, it's a huge span of time, and we've had mathematics, working mathematics, which was used to calculate all of this, okay. without complicating, the reason why I have to cover this is because for me to place Ramayana to a particular age, I need to give this information to you all. Okay? So for us, 24 hours is one day, right? In our culture, it is called as Ahoratra, which means it includes a day and a night. So a day and a night becomes an Ahoratra. One day is 24 hours. Similarly, 365 days is 1 year. Okay, very simple for us. From here on, I'll take it up to a next level. Okay, now we are going to talk of the timelines of Brahma. Why Brahma? Because Brahma is the creator of this Prakriti. We need to be talking of timelines in relation to Brahma. Okay. So there is a concept called Yuga. You must have heard words like Kali Yuga or Satyug or Treta Yuga or Dwapar Yuga, right? These are the words which we generally find elders speaking. This whole world is going to dooms. This is the end of Kali Yuga is something that generally we would be hearing in our times, right? So what is Kali Yuga? What are these Yuga? Okay, so let me try and put a math to it. Our human year is 365 days, right? So when we have 4,32,000, okay, so 432,000 human years make one Kali Yuga. 432,000 years of a man makes one Kali Yuga. Double of Kali Yuga is Dwapar. Okay, Dwapar Yuga is double of Kali Yuga. 3 times Kali Yuga is Treta. Treta Yuga is 3 times of Kali Yuga. And Satyug, the first Yuga, is 4 times of Kali Yuga. Okay, so basically 43,20,000, so 4.32 million years is one Mahayug. Mahayug means 4 yugs put together. Sat, Treta, Dwapar, Kali. All 4 yugs put together becomes a group of years which is 4.32 million years. Okay, 43,20,000 years become one Mahayug. Such Mahayugs, when we go for 1,000 Mahayugs, okay, so we just spoke of 4.32 million is one Mahayug. So when we shift this and multiply it by 1,000, it becomes one day for Brahma. Okay, not even night, it is just one day. Okay, so 1,000 Mahayugs become one day. Similarly, 1,000 Mahayugs become one night. Thus, 2 of Mahayugs, 2 of 1,000, that is 2,000 Mahayugs become one Ahoratra for Brahma. Is it clear? Are you all still with me? Yeah? So we started with 1 year. Then we said what is the basic year, Yuga, which is a Kali Yuga. The shortest of the Yuga is Kali Yuga, which is 4,32,000, right? And then we shifted to one Mahayug, which is 4.32 million. And then 1,000 of such Mahayugs become one day. It is called as one Kalpa. Okay? One Kalpa is basically one day. And similarly, one Kalpa becomes one night. That is one Ahoratra. And Brahma lives for 100 years. So, one day, then 300 days of Brahma makes 1 year, and like that for 100 years Brahma lives. Okay? That is the age of the nature, the Prakriti that we are living today. Okay? That is the kind of timelines that we are talking of. And the current Brahma that we are talking of, okay, is the 7th Brahma. Which means there are 6 Brahmas who have already lived, ruled and gone by. So 600 of Brahma years have gone by, and we are living in the 7th Prakriti, and in that 7th Brahma, we are in the 51st year, early morning, we are living. Okay, so it is, Brahma has just got up from his slumber, and it's early morning for Brahma on the 51st year, first day. Okay, so we are looking at timelines which are simply mind-boggling and beyond comprehension. Okay, and the reason why I'm giving you this knowledge is to understand the expanse of time when we are dealing with our Puranas. It is important to understand that after every Mahayug there is a small time when there is a Pralay, and then after every Kalpa there is again a Pralay. Okay, so time gets reset, Brahma takes a little rest, and then there is a Pralay that happens. So after every Kalpa, after 1000 Mahayugs, Brahma's night is a night of inaction. So just as 1000 Mahayug there was action, creation, death, maintenance. 1000 Mahayug is of inaction. Brahma is sleeping, so there is nothing happening. Okay, and that is how the entire thing goes on. Okay, so it is important for us to understand this particular timeline. Now, why did I explain all this complex mathematics? Is because Ramayana happened in the Treta Yuga. Okay, it happened in the second Yuga, Treta Yuga. So a lot of people give an age to Ramayana, saying that it is 5,000 year old or 7,000 year old or 10,000 year old or whatever. As per our culture, as per our beliefs, it is 17.5 lakh years back. Okay, so Treta Yuga almost ended 17.5 lakh years back, and Ramayana belongs to that age. Okay, Mahabharata happened at the end of Dwapar Yuga, which is 5,000 years back. And Kali Yuga started some 5,000 years back. So we are in a Kali which is just 5,000 years old, and we have still got 427,000 years to go ahead. So we are just small speck, an insignificant speck of nowhere, right? We just live 100 years and or 80 years. We think our life is big. It is just nothing. It is a small speck. It is not even a blink for Brahma, right? Brahma might be taking a longer time to even blink his eye. So that's the kind of timelines that we are talking of. So this is the kind of timelines that our culture talks of. There is also a rule for space. Okay, so what kind of space that we are talking of? This is again something that will find relevance and narration in as we go along in our storytelling. So our world is divided into 14 worlds. Okay, 7 upper world and 7 lower worlds. We are in the middle world called Bhu. Bhu means earth. Okay, Bhulok. This is where we live, and there are 7 worlds below us, 7 worlds above us. I will not get into the names; it will be more confusing. But these 14 worlds, all encompassed, become one egg. That is why it's called Andam. Okay. So that Andam becomes a Brahmandam. The egg which Brahma created is Brahmandam. Okay, and Brahma at a time manages crores of such Andams. That is why it is Ananta Koti Brahmandam. Okay, so he manages at a time he manages innumerable eggs, and each egg has got 14 lokas, and in that we are somewhere, right? And then 5,000 years of the Kali of some Kalpa and some Manvantara we are living, and we live like this time, this space, and go off. We just don't make any impact on nature at all. Okay. So it is the reason why I gave you this expanse of time and space is for us to understand the insignificance of our lives, but at the same time, the ruler of Prakriti, the God, the Supreme God, has attention on every life form. He doesn't let go of any life form, and that is the reason he is God. He pays attention to every life form, every prayer that we put up. It's always answered. So there is not a single prayer that will go ever unanswered, and that is the power of God. And that is the reason Vishnu is always in a meditative sleeping, because his constant attention is on Prakriti. He needs to be constantly in sync with what is happening in the nature. And that is the reason Vishnu is always in a meditative sleep mode. He's actually not sleeping, he's a meditative yoga nidra. Okay, continuously in sync with nature, and every jivatma means every soul that is living in this Prakriti across all the timelines, across all the Brahmandams. He is looking at each of us. So that is about the background, and I thought I should probably give that as a background. So now let us start the basic story which begins on Ramayana. Okay. So there are 4 sons to Brahma. Brahma had a lot of sons, but as soon as Brahma was made in charge of creation, he thought that I am alone, so I need help in creation. So out of his yogic power, he created 4 sons. Okay, they are called as Sanat Kumaras. Okay, so these 4 sons, as soon as they were born as Jivan Mukta, means they were born as wise, philosophically advanced souls. The moment they were born, they said, bye bye, we are going on a yatra. Okay, Brahma said, no, you are supposed to be doing, helping me in create the Prakriti, to help maintain this creation. They said, no, we are born wise, so we are going on our journey to find the truth. So they leave their father and they go. They go to different places, and one of the places that they go is to Vaikuntha. Vaikuntha is the place where Vishnu resides. Okay, Vishnu is said to be residing on an ocean of milk. Okay, that is supposedly 7 times larger than a Brahmandakam. Okay, in terms of its size, it's 7 times larger. It is called a Kshirabdi, which is ocean of milk. And on the ocean of the milk, somewhere in the middle, he is lying on a bed of snakes with Lakshmi at his foot. Okay. So these 4 Sanat Kumaras, they go and try to take audience with Vishnu. In order to understand the secret of life, in order to understand the secret of nature, how it operates, they wanted to learn. So they go and stand at their door. The Vishnu had 2 security. All we see security across all residential complexes, offices. You have the security Dwarapalak, which means person who takes care of your door is called a Dwarapalak. This couple of security people, bouncers kind of, hatte strong men. Now these 2, they stop these 4 Sanat Kumaras and they say, no, Vishnu is in a deep meditative state. You cannot enter. So they get upset. They said, no, we have to take audience. We have some question to ask. You have to allow us. So they said, no, you cannot. You cannot go in at all. So there's no chance you can get in. So those 4 curse. Okay, those 2 security fellows, saying that you will be born on earth as normal human beings. Okay, so we have to understand that taking birth on earth is a curse for gods. We take birth and we do it with pride, but for gods it is a curse. Okay, the name of those 2 Dwarapalak, the security people, was Jai and Vijay. Okay, Jai and Viru nahi hai, it is Jai and Vijay. Okay, this is the names of those 2 security guards. So then they realize the importance of not having allowed these 4 Kumaras. They go to Vishnu and they say, oh, this is the problem that has happened. You have to please help me. You cannot let us go and take birth. We have to be here looking after you. You can't allow us to go down. They say, we can't do anything. They have given a curse. It will play out. Right? But as an Vimochan, means as an way out of the curse, I'll give you 2 options. Okay, so he says, take any of these 2 options so that you can come back from that particular curse. So what is the option? They say, you either take 100 births as normal human beings, okay, take 100 different births on earth as normal human beings, or take only 3 births but as my enemy. Okay, so you either take 100 births as normal human being or take 3 births but you will be my enemy. When you take birth, you will be as a demon and you will become my enemy, right? So they say in terms of count, 3 is easier, right? And then they said, okay, we'll take 3, we don't mind becoming your enemy, but we would want to come back early, right? But what happens is, the moment they take the birth, they get into that mindset of a demon, they get into a mindset of an enemy, and in each of the birth, they do a lot of penance and elongate their lives, saying that I don't want to die, okay? So the first Janma is Hiranyaksha, Hiranyakashipu. The second is Ravana Kumbhakarna, which comes in Ramayana, and the third is Shishupala Dantavakra, which comes in the Mahabharata. Okay, in the first 2, both Hiranyaksha, Hiranyakashipu and Ravana, Kumbhakarna, they do extensive penance for almost thousands of years and ask for a boon that they should never die. So what would have been 100 births of a normal 100 years, their each birth turned out to be much larger than even a single birth. Okay, and they became an enemy. So Vishnu had to take an avatar to kill each of these and to relieve them and to get into the next Janma and then slowly then come back as Jai Vijay. Okay? Clear till now? Now what happens is we have different kinds of avatar. Okay? So Vishnu has 10 avatars. Right? We must have all heard the Matsya avatar, Kurma, Varaha, Narasimha, Vamana, Parshurama, Rama, Krishna, Buddha, Kalki. Okay, so 10 avatars of Vishnu that he took for the sake of mankind, for the sake of uplifting dharma and establishing dharma. Okay, each time when he took, he either killed a demon or he killed the bad within us, but he ensured that dharma got established. Okay, that was the purpose of taking an avatar. Right? To take avatar means to come down. To avatar in literally means that God has come down. Whom has he come down for? He has come down for us. Okay? That is what avatar means. So if you actually see and map, a lot of people now say this is what Darwin's theory of evolution is. Matsya is fish, right? Kurma is an amphibian, both water and land. Then there is an animal which is a quadruped which walks on four, which is a boar, right? Matsya, Kurma, Varaha, boar. Narasimha, half man, half animal. Then there is a midget, okay, a small man. Then there is an angry man, and then there is a Rama and Krishna, and then there is a saint Buddha, and then there is Kalki. Kalki is where he will destroy everything, okay, because adharma is increased to a level where now he cannot repair it. He has to end the Prakriti, and then so that a new Prakriti can come in place. Prakriti means nature, right? So there are different types of avatar that is taken, and there are classifications for this avatar. There is something called as an Apurna avatar. There is something called as a Nimitta avatar. There is something called as a Ansha avatar. And there is something called as a Purna avatar. Okay? I'll try and explain each of this. So, Ansha avatar means a part of that God takes form as somebody and comes on earth. Okay? So, Hanuman was an Ansha. Ansha means a part. Okay? Literally means a part of Shiva took avatar and came down as Hanuman. Okay? That is what is called as Ansha avatar. Then you have called something called as a Nimitta avatar. Nimitta means for a particular purpose. So they only come for a particular purpose, they achieve that purpose and it goes back. Okay? So Matsya, Kurma, Varaha. So the first few avatars, they didn't have an entire life. Okay? They were not born. Like for example, Narsimha avatar, you might have heard the story, he just comes straight out of a pillar. Yeah. He comes, saves Prahlad, kills Hiranyakashipu and goes. Right? So they come for a particular purpose and they go. Okay? Vamana avatar and Parshurama avatar were Apurna avatar, which means they are considered as incomplete avatar. Although they were full in terms of a human body, they lived a full life. Why are they called as Apurna avatar? Apurna means incomplete, right? Why? Because a god is considered God when he has 16 qualities. Okay? 16 good qualities. When those all 16 qualities are encompassed in somebody, that person then becomes a god. Okay? When these avatars were taken, only few qualities of the god took avatar and they lived on earth. So hence they are incomplete in terms of the 16 qualities. The only two proper avatars that actually got taken by Vishnu was, one is Rama, which was a Purna avatar, and Krishna, which was again a Purna avatar. I'll just quickly cover a few qualities of 16. The 16 qualities. What are these qualities? Bravery, living life as per dharma, being truthful, determined, good character, things good for others. He's intelligent, he's wise, he's good looking. Okay, so if you see Rama and Krishna avatar, they are extremely good looking avatars. Okay, he who has won over anger, Okay, he who's famous, he who doesn't have jealousy, he who doesn't have any attachment. So there's 16 qualities which are ascribed to God, which makes a complete human being or a complete a God. Okay, these qualities are prerequisite for that. So the only two avatars which had all the 16 qualities was Rama and Krishna. Rest all were Apurna avatars. So I will not get into the earlier parts or the earlier avatars because they are part of Vishnu Puran. They are technically not a part of the Ramayana at all. Okay, we have about 10 more minutes to go. So what happens is, why Vishnu decided to take the avatar of Rama. So as I said, Jai and Vijay have finished their first set of birth, which is Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu. They are finished with their birth. They got killed. And now they have taken birth as Ravana and Kumbhakarna. And because they were demons, they did thousands of years of penance and they asked for living. They asked for immortality. They wanted to live permanently. And because they were demons, they were cruel. So they were also powerful. So they did a lot of cruel things in the world. They controlled a lot of things in the world. And they were causing a lot of problems to good people. Right? So the Devas are people who are in charge of the nature. Okay, they are basically managers, right? Just like you have Vishnu, Shiva and Brahma in charge of creation, sustenance and destruction. They have then delegated, like an organization, they delegated to managers, right? So you have the Devas. Indra is the king of Devas, he is in charge of rain. Varuna is the king of water, so all water bodies he will manage. Agni is with regards to fire, right? Then you have Vayu, who's the manager of air. Okay, Kubera is the manager of wealth. Okay, he doesn't own it. Okay, Kubera doesn't own wealth. Kubera is a treasurer. He is holding the wealth on behalf of gods. Okay, so these are the jobs that are given to different devas. So all the devas rush to Brahma. Brahma says, I don't have an answer. I am the person who gave the boon that they can live for as long as they want. So we'll have to go to the most supreme god, that is Vishnu. So they all go to Vishnu. And they say there is a lot of problem that Ravana and Kumbhakarna are creating. You need to take an avatar to ensure that you curtail them and kill them. So Vishnu then promises that yes, I will come down in a form of an avatar. So they are all very happy. But then Vishnu puts a condition. He says, I will take a birth as a normal, common man. Okay, I will have no special powers. I will not show any miracles. I will live a life of a normal man. So it is both, not only for killing Ravana and Kumbhakarna, but also for us to tell how a life has to be led. So generally a lot of people, when you say why Rama took avatar or why Krishna took avatar, well, the first thing that comes to mind is, well, Rama took avatar to kill Ravana and Kumbhakarna. Krishna took avatar to kill Kamsa, to kill the Kauravas, or all the demons that he killed. The answer is no. Rama and Krishna took avatar for us to show how life is to be led. Right? He took avatars, went through all the pains to show us that even if you go through pains, you can still live life as per dharma. Krishna showed us the path through his words. Living life as what Krishna lived is going to be dangerous. He showed us he showed by his words how life is to be led. So why they took avatar? They took avatar for us to teach us a message, right? But in their game, in their sport, it is called, the word used in our culture is called Leela, right? So it's a sport for God, and they play the entire, the particular, if you want to call a play, where you have different characters. So there's an evil character, there's Rama who comes. So it's a play with a message for us to know what is right and wrong. Okay, so that is the way we have to view Ramayana, right? So they decide that Rama will come, but he will only come as a normal human being. Now it is important for us to know that God himself has to come down. The parents have to be that eligible, right? He can't just choose any parents who are adharmai or who are not living life as per the right in the right manner, not righteous manner, who are not living their lives as per the rules that has been established. So he had to find a clan, a family, which befits for him to take birth. Who? Vishnu himself, right? The father of the entire Prakriti had to take birth and come down. So he had to choose a good family. So he chooses a family in the Ikshvaku clan, which is the Surya Vamshi. So he chooses a clan of those who are born to sun. Okay, Surya Vamshi means those who are born to sun. The first Raja was Ikshvaku. Okay, in that particular clan, which is considered to have led, all the kings have been illustrious. They have led as their life for dharma. They have given their lives for dharma. He chose such a beautiful and eligible clan to be born to, and he chose Dasharatha and Kaushalya as his parents. Okay, so we common men don't have the choice to take, choose. Okay, I'll choose. This is my parents. This is my father. This is my mother. No, we don't have that. God has the ability to choose. Okay, this is going to be my father. This is going to be my mother. So Vishnu chose them to be the parents. What do you mean by Dasharatha? Okay, Dasharatha simply means 10 chariots. Okay, that Dasha means 10, Ratha means chariot. But the actual meaning is not that. The actual meaning is he is a person who could ride a chariot in 10 different directions. Okay, now which are these 10 different directions? East, west, north, south. 4. Northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest. How much? Which are the other 2? Up and down. Okay, so he could go up 7 lokas I told of, down 7 lokas that I told of. So 2D mein you can do this 8 directions, and in 3D up and down. So he could ride a chariot in any direction that he wanted. That is why he was called as Dasharatha. That is the name that he got. Okay, so he chooses Dasharatha to be born to. Now what is happening? Now we come to, so this is all that has happened in Vaikuntha. Okay, Dasharatha doesn't know Vishnu has decided to be born to him and all. Now we'll come to where Dasharatha is living. Okay, so Dasharatha is a king of Kosala Rajya. Okay, that is the name of the country, and is living in a city called Ayodhya. Ayodhya simply means a city where there can be no war. Okay, there can be no clash. There is so much peace that there can simply no war be waged on that land. And a war not only physical, even mental. People who live in Ayodhya had so much peace of mind that there was no clash even in their own minds. Okay, so that is why it was called as Ayodhya. Today's Ayodhya is different because we are living in Kali Yuga. There is a lot of clash that is happening there. But that day, Ayodhya, the reason why it got that name is because there will be no war at all in that particular land. Dasharatha had 3 wives. Kala Desh Niyam. Okay, time and space rule. He was allowed to have wives. He had 3 wives. The first one is Kaushalya, the second one is Sumitra, and the third one is Kaikeyi. So everybody is now supposed to now start noting down the names, because as we go and progress ahead in the story, we will encounter lot of characters and names. Okay, so and these names are going to be important. So when I go ahead in story and I suddenly quote Sumitra, then you have to know who's Sumitra. You can't ask me who's Sumitra, right? You need to know Sumitra is the second wife for Dasharatha, right? So he had 3 wives, but he didn't have any children, right? So he was longing for children. So he said, I need to have children. So because he's a king, right? Somebody has he has to retire someday, and somebody has to take care of the kingdom. And the kingdom of what? I mean, Surya Vamshi kingdom, which has never gone without a king at all. So Dasharatha is extremely worried, and he goes to his Raja Guru. Raja Guru is Guru who takes care of the administration. Okay, so he goes to his Guru Vasishtha. Okay, and he says, we need to do something about this. I don't have children, and I need to have a contingency. I need to have a continuity plan, right? In today's world, and I need to have somebody to take care of my kingdom so that I can retire and go, and somebody else takes care of the kingdom. I'm also getting old. He ruled for 10,000 years, Dasharatha. Okay, so now we want somebody to take care of his kingdom. So he says, Vasishtha says, the only person who can help you is a sage called Rishiya Shringa. Okay, he is staying in a mountain called Shringagiri, which is still there in south. Okay, it's supposed to be one of the most beautiful and a very pious place. Even today, one of the Adi Shankara Matha is established in Sringeri, And it is so because Sringagiri, Rishyashringa did penance in that particular place. And Rishyashringa is considered to be one of the purest of rishis. So he's saying, don't even come to me, Dasharatha. You have to go to Rishyashringa for help. So Rishyashringa says, I am ready to help you. Let us do a yagna. Yagna is where you lit fire and then you do a home, right? So he's saying, let us do a Putra Kameshti Yagna. Putra Kameshti Yagna means a yagna done to obtain progeny, son or daughter, whatever. Okay? Putra Kameshti Yagna. This Putra Kameshti Yagna that Rishyashringa does goes for a year. Now imagine the yagna that we do. 2 hours, oh my legs are paining. Is it over? Is the food ready? Can we have it? Yeah? So we don't have patience to even sit for a couple of hours. The first thing when we do plan a yagna in the home, what is the first question we ask? How long is it going to take? Right? 2 hours, 3 hours. When the Guruji says, no, it's going to take 4 hours, 4 hours. Okay, prepare some breakfast because I can't hold myself in fasting mode for 4 hours. Right? So they do the yagna for 365 days, 1 year, 1 samvatsara. Year. Samvatsara is the Sanskrit name for year. So they do the puja for 1 whole year, and from the fire, Yagna Purusha, the person who's being called from a yagna. When you do a yagna, you do it for a purpose. Okay? When that purpose gets achieved, that purpose needs to come in a form to give us that blessing. Okay? Now all this was happening in Dwapar and Treta Yuga. Kali Yuga, all this doesn't happen. So we do Navagraha Homa, nobody is going to come out of that. Okay? And we will also get afraid. Right? And we don't do it with so much bhakti. So in those days they used to do with that rigor. That there was a Yagna Purusha who comes out, and he comes out with a bowl of payasam, which is kheer. Okay? And he says that you drink this, right? Then you will get children. Okay? So Dasharatha is very happy. And he says, okay, now I'll give this to all my 3 queens. I'll distribute it to all my 3 queens, and so that they can give birth to children. What he does is, he divides that kheer to 50%. The 50%, the first 50% he gives to Kaushalya, his first queen. The balance 50% he divides into 2. Out of that, 25% he gives to Sumitra. Now how much is left? 25%. He cuts that again into 12.5 and 12.5, and 1 12.5 he gives to Kaikeyi. Now how much is remaining? Another 12.5. Now he's now waiting. Whom do I give? Do I give to Kaushalya, who's already got 50%, right? Or do it to Kaikeyi? Kaushalya and Kaikeyi had a very strange relationship. So they said, no, I can't give it to again Kaikeyi. So whom do I give it to? I give it to Sumitra. Why? Because Sumitra was considered to be the wisest of the wives. Okay? And this is a quality that I will cover as we go along in Ramayana. We will come to know the greatness of what Sumitra is, the way she brought up her 2 sons, Lakshmana and Shatrughna. What Lakshmana was for Rama and what Shatrughna was for Bharata is a testimony, is a witness to how Sumitra brought up her kids. Because she was extremely wise. She was not necessarily worldly wise, she was philosophically wise. And both Kaushalya and Kaikeyi were never jealous of Sumitra, because Sumitra was a withdrawn state. She was always withdrawn from all this petty politics. Okay? So she was always a wise, philosophically inclined lady. So he said, this 12.5% I will give it to Sumitra. So 50% becomes Rama. Sumitra gets Lakshmana and Shatrughna, and Kaikeyi gets Bharata. Okay? So today I will stop the story at this. Rama, Bharata, Lakshmana, Shatrughna have born, which is a very auspicious thing. Okay? The way they were born is, first was Rama, second was Bharata, third was Lakshmana, and fourth was Shatrughna. Okay? I'll just quickly tell a small story, which is an Upakatha, which is what I told. This is a side story. Okay? So all the 4 kids were kept in a cradle. Okay? And all are crying, wailing like really loud. So Dasharatha comes in and says, why are the kids shouting so much? I am worried that they will die out of just crying. So Vasishtha comes and he says, do one thing, you shift the cradle. Keep Lakshmana's cradle near Rama and Shatrughna's cradle near Bharata. So the crying goes down a little, but they're still crying. So he said, okay, do this. Pick Lakshmana and put in the same cradle as Rama, and pick Shatrughna and put them in the same cradle as Bharata, and they stop crying. Okay? So in the story also, you will see that there was a natural affinity. They were in love with each other continuously. All four brothers had extreme love for each other. There is no doubt at all. But there was a natural affinity between Rama and Lakshmana, and there was a natural affinity between Shatrughna and Bharata. Okay? And this will play out in the entire story of Ramayana. So I will take a break here. We will probably continue with this beautiful story of Rama in weeks to come. Right? Yes, Sarah, you had a question? So Vishnu decided, right? So Vishnu decided that I will come in my fullest form on earth to give moral and message to common people on how to lead life. So when Vishnu decides that, he said, I will come with all my 16 qualities in full form. While in all the other avatars, he doesn't come in all his form. He comes in only with specific qualities. He doesn't come with all his qualities. It's only in the Rama avatar and Krishna avatar that he comes with his entire full form. Yeah. True. Very, very nice question. So let me try and cover the parts of the story. As we go along, I will cover each of this. Okay? I will cover each of these qualities. I will cover as to why Rama did what he did. He even cries. At some point of time when Sita gets abducted by Ravana, he actually cries, wails for her. Okay? So I will cover all of those qualities. Okay? And as to why they did what they did. He even gets angry. There are times when Rama also gets angry. So I will also cover all of that as a part of the story. And at that particular point of time, it will get clarified. It probably is a little too early for me to cover those because these are part of the stories which will come few weeks hereinafter. But you park that question, keep it in mind, and do ask me at a particular appropriate time. Yeah, you can maybe send me a WhatsApp message. I'll keep a note of it. Yeah, so we'll now, as a part of our ritual, we will sing Hanuman Chalisa. Hanuman Chalisa was the shloka or a prayer which was written by Tulsi Das, a saint who lived in our country, who wrote Ramayana in Awadh. Awadh is a language. Okay, that Awadh language where he wrote a Ramayana. In that he comes and he writes about Hanuman. Okay, so there are 40 shlokas, 40 verses. It doesn't take more than 5 minutes to utter them. So we will now start as the last thing. As I told, the first thing we do is we pray for Ganapati. The last thing we should do is we should pray for Hanuman. Ganapati is remover of obstacles. Hanuman is remover of problems in life. Okay, he is called as Sankata Mochana. Sankata means problems. Mochana means someone who removes. Vinayak, that is Ganapati, is called Vigna Harta. Vigna means obstacles. Harta means remover. Okay? So we will now sing Hanuman Chalisa, which will just take about 5 minutes. Yeah? Good. Shri Guru Charana Saroj Raja Nijaman Mukur Sudhari Dharnau Raghuvar Bimal Jasu Yakupalachari Buddhihin Tan Janike Sumiro Pavan Kumar Bala Buddhi Vidya Dehu Mohe Haro Klesha Vikar Jai Hanuman Gyan Gun Sagar Jai Kapi Sati Loka Ujagar Ram Duta Tulita Baladhama Anjani Putra Pavana Sutanama Vikrama Bajarangi Kumati Nivar Sumati Ke Sangi Kanchana Varana Viraj Subesa Kanana Kundala Kunchita Kesa Hatha Vajra aur Dhwaja Viraje Kandhe Munj Janai Husaje Sankar Suvan Kesari Nandana Teja Pratapa Mahajag वंदन विद्यावान गुणी अति चातुर राम काज करिबेको आतुर प्रभु चरित्र सुनिबेको रसिया
राम लखन सीता मन बसिया
सूक्ष्म रूप धरि सियहि दिखावा विकट रूप धरि लंक जरावा भीम रूप धरि असुर संहारे
रामचंद्र के काज सवारे
लाए सजीवन लखन जियाए श्री रघुवीर हर्षि उर लाए रघुपति कीन्ही बहुत बढ़ाई तुम मम प्रिय भरत ही सम भाई सहस बदन तुमरो यश गावे अस कहि श्रीपति कंठ लगावे सनकादिक ब्रह्मादि मुनीसा
नारद सारद सहित अहिसा
जम कुबेर दिक्पाल जहाते कवि कोविद कहि सके कहाते तुम उपकार सुग्रीव ही कीना राम मिलाए राजपद दीना
तुमरो
मंत्र विभीषण माना लंकेश्वर भय सब जग जाना जुग सहस्र योजन पर भानु लील्यो ताहि मधुर फल जानू
प्रभु मुद्रिका मेरी मुख माही जल
दिलांग गए अचरज नाही दुर्गम काज जगत के जेते सुगम अनुग्रह तुम्हारे तेते राम दुआरे तुम रखवारे
होतन आज्ञा बिनु पैसा
सब सुख है तुम्हारी सरना तुम रक्षक काहू को डरना
आपन
तेज संहारो आपे तीनों लोक हाँकते कापे
भूत
पिशाच निकट नहीं आवे महावीर जब नाम सुनावे नासे रोग हरे सब पीरा जपत निरंतर हनुमत बीरा
संकट से हनुमान
छुड़ावे मन क्रम वचन ध्यान जो लावे सब पर राम तपस्वी राजा तिनके काज सकल तुम साजा
और
मनोरथ जो कोई लावे सोई अमित जीवन फल पावे चारों जुग परताप तुम्हारा है प्रसिद्ध जगत उजियारा
साधु संत के तुम रखवारे
असुर निकंदन राम दुलारे अष्ट सिद्धि नवनिधि के दाता असवर दीन जानकी माता
राम रसायन तुमरे
पासा सदा रहो रघुपति के दासा तुम्हारे भजन राम को पावे जन्म जन्म के दुख बिसरावे
अंत काल रघुबर पुर
जाई जहाँ जन्म हरि भक्त कहाई और देवता चित्तन धरई हनुमत से सर्व सुख करई
संकट कटे मिटे
सब पीरा जो सुमिरै हनुमत बलबीरा
जय
जय जय हनुमान गोसाई कृपा करहु गुरुदेव की नाई जो शत बार पाठ करे कोई छूट ही बंदी महासुख होई जो यह पढ़े हनुमान चालीसा होए सिद्धि साखी गौरीसा
तुलसीदास
सदा हरि चेरा की जय नाथ हृदय महडेरा पवन तनय संकट हरन मंगल मूर्ति रूप राम लखन सीता सहित हृदय बसहु सुरभूप सियावर रामचंद्र की
जय
के बोलो हनुमान की
जय
थैंक यू. Was I audible?